Mr. Beer, can I explain that one of our assessors is joined in remotely this morning, and I understand that before we begin hearing evidence, you wish to raise the issue of disclosure.
Yes. It's a matter of importance that I wanted to update you and the core participants on before we call Mr. Bates to give his oral evidence and commence the substance of the hearings in phases 5 and 6. The core participants were sent an email by the solicitor to the inquiry yesterday that contained relevant correspondence from the Post Office that dates between the 28th of March and the 5th of April sent to the inquiry. That consists of 9 letters. I would propose to give you a brief background before moving to the current issue. I'm going to try and keep it as succinct as possible, but I also think that putting the current issue in context may assist you. So you'll recall that the Post Office's late and problematic disclosure of documents has been a constant theme in this inquiry, resulting in you ordering that we hear oral evidence from the Post Office and its inquiry representatives in 2 disclosure-related hearings held in July and September last year. On the 12th of January this year, the inquiry held a further hearing on disclosure and called Post Office's recognised legal representative, Mr. Jackson of Burgess Salmon LLP, to give oral evidence. You will recall that by and large the key issue that was discussed at that hearing was how the Post Office had discovered a further Post Office repository or data source known as Microsoft Exchange 365. You'll recall that the Microsoft Exchange 365 repository was brought to the inquiry's attention during the Phase 4 hearings, and as a result, the inquiry received numerous, sometimes voluminous, last-minute disclosure of documents said to relate to Phase 4 witnesses, on some occasions only days before some witnesses were due to give their evidence. During the January hearing, Mr. Jackson said that such last-minute disclosure by the Post Office during the Phase 4 hearings had been, quote, suboptimal. Those late disclosures had put immense pressure on the inquiry counsel and solicitor teams, who worked extremely hard to ensure that the Phase 4 hearings could in fact continue as planned. In some instances, regrettably, a decision was made to postpone or reschedule a witness at short notice, including, you'll remember, Mr. Jenkins and Mr. Longman, both of whom the inquiry has now scheduled to hear during phases 5 and 6. Whilst other matters were discussed at the hearing held on the 12th of January, the focus was on the Post Office's work related to the Microsoft Exchange repository. On the 31st of January this year, and following the hearing, you made directions which were published on the inquiry website. Those directions provided that, firstly, a meeting would be held between the representatives of the inquiry and the Post Office to discuss disclosure issues as soon as reasonably practicable, and in any event, well before the commencement of oral hearings in phases 5 and 6. You directed that the meeting would be minuted and that the minutes should be agreed and thereafter disclosed to core participants. And secondly, you ordered that a further disclosure hearing should be convened either before or during phases 5 and 6 of the inquiry. On the 28th of February 2024, members of the inquiry team and information management team met with the Post Office and its representatives in this building as directed by you, and the inquiry later circulated a copy of the minute of that meeting as agreed with the Post Office to core participants. I'll not read the minute in full, but I note that paragraph 3 of the minute, as circulated, says as follows. At the outset of the meeting, leading counsel to the inquiry, that's me, noted that from the inquiry's perspective, the aim of the meeting was to ensure that the Post Office are doing as much as possible to ensure phases 5 and 6 can proceed in accordance with the inquiry timetable. Mr. Jackson confirmed that the Post Office agreed and noted that the Post Office's starting point for the meeting was prioritising and clarifying what needed to be done in line with your directions, ensuring reasonable and proportionate disclosure whilst minimising and hopefully avoiding disruption to the hearing timetable and the inquiry's proceedings. Counsel to the inquiry confirmed that the aim was not minimising disruption to the hearings, but eliminating it, given the Post Office's highly disruptive late disclosure in Phase 4. Mr. Jackson confirmed that the Post Office also aspired to eliminate disruption wherever it was possible to do so, and that the Post Office's recent structural work should have mitigated the likelihood that a new disclosure issue would come from left field. In order to achieve that objective, prior to the meeting, the inquiry had provided the Post Office with a series of deadlines for any further late disclosure of Microsoft Exchange documents in correspondence. In summary, quote, for all oral witnesses, but for those listed within the 4 weeks of the inquiry timetable, the inquiry directed that any late disclosure must be provided by the Post Office no later than 6 weeks before the date on which the witness is due to be called to give evidence. For the witnesses listed in the first 4 weeks, separate specific deadlines had been set in March 2024. The inquiry and the Post Office also discussed what the inquiry understood to be relatively ad hoc and less significant potential document sources, i.e. other than Microsoft Exchange. This was outlined in the meeting minute at paragraph 10. Quote, Mr. Jackson then took the inquiry legal team through the work completed by the Post Office regarding other potential document sources, including Mimecast, SMS, and instant messaging, and e-media sources, brackets, corporate devices, servers, backup tapes, and file stores. Post Office's representatives confirmed that they had sent and were still sending questionnaires regarding data sources to specific former Post Office employees and board members. Material held by third-party advisors and material relating to whistleblowing was also discussed. In short, the inquiry understood that work was still ongoing in relation to some of the additional data sources, but should Post Office have any material update, and in particular, should any particular data source contain highly relevant material, Post Office would alert the inquiry as soon as possible. On distributing the minute to call participants, the inquiry noted that as the disclosure process by the Post Office was continuing and the disclosure of additional documents to the inquiry had only recently started, I had advised you that the inquiry legal team ought to continue to monitor the Post Office's compliance with the inquiry disclosure requirements and report to you at regular intervals. The reporting ought to include whether the Post Office continued to meet the deadlines the inquiry had set in order to enable the Phase 5 and 6 oral hearings to proceed and thereafter continued as scheduled. At that stage, I and the solicitor to the inquiry advised that we considered it premature for the inquiry to hold a further disclosure hearing prior to the commencement of Phases 5 and 6 today. You considered our advice and confirmed you agreed with it, but in the light of the historic disclosure issues and the disruptive nature of the Post Office's late disclosure of Microsoft Exchange material in Phase 4, you noted that you wanted to keep this issue under very close consideration. You also noted that you would not hesitate to hold a hearing should it become necessary in due course. Throughout February and March, the Post Office continued to disclose a large volume of material as a result of its Microsoft Exchange disclosure failings and the remediation exercises put in place to rectify them. The last of these productions was made on the 22nd of March 2024. Can I turn to the present issue then? On Thursday, the 28th of March, the legal representatives for the Post Office notified the inquiry that the Post Office would be providing the inquiry with documents that day and the following week in relation to witnesses giving evidence during the first week of Phases 5 and 6 of the hearings and in the latter part of April, or documents which might otherwise be, quote, of interest to the inquiry. The volume of documents was said to be in the low hundreds and no more than 1,000, and to have come from, quote, a last check scoping exercise, particularly in relation to documents from third-party advisors. Some such documents were in response to the inquiry's Section 21 notice, issued as long ago as the 21st of July 2023, known as Section 21.3, Others were not responsive to a notice or a request from the inquiry, but were otherwise of interest. As I say, Section 21.3 was sent by the inquiry to the Post Office back on the 21st of July last year, in which the inquiry mandated that the Post Office disclose several categories of material relevant to phases 5 and 6 of the inquiry, i.e. documents addressing what was defined in the notice as relevant issues. The relevant issues including reviews of Horizon carried out by Ernst & Young, Deloitte, KPMG and Linklaters. The notice expressly stated the documents that the documents be those created by, sent to, or received by, recorded a conversation or meeting involving, or otherwise made reference to 19 specific individuals within the Post Office. The individuals named in the notice included, but were not limited to, Paula Venables, Alice Perkins, Olwen Lyons, Angela Vanden Bogart, Mark Davis, Tim Parker, and Susan Crichton. At 5:32 on Thursday, the 28th of March, the Post Office sent a cover letter for a production of 1,071 documents. The cover letter noticed that the Post Office had, quote, initiated 2 assurance exercises, the first being a review of specific third-party advisor material, and the second being search and review of email inboxes of personal assistants, PAs, to the Section 21.3 individuals, and other email inboxes of potential relevance where considered appropriate for this exercise. The letter further explained that the Post Office's, quote, Section 21.3 search methodology focused on the relevant individuals' data sources. Third-party advisor files and personal assistant emails have previously been reviewed for other Rule 9s and Section 21s, as explained in previous interim disclosure statements. However, as part of assurance, Post Office has now run such searches across specific third-party advisor files, as was set out in the letter. So such third-party advisors included those who the inquiry had specifically named in the Section 21 notice, including Linklaters, Deloitte, and KPMG. The Post Office explained that within the production of 1,071 documents, 788 of them were said to be relevant to Section 21.3, of which 583 related to witnesses, and 15 documents were said to be, quote, of high relevance and material. 44 documents were said to be documents of interest, being documents that the Post Office said were not directly responsive to the notice, but were otherwise of relevance to the inquiry's terms of reference. Of those, 6 related to witnesses. The remaining 239 documents were family members of such documents. The Post Office noted that a number of the documents could be apparent duplicates of previous documents already produced, but that information to assist in identifying duplicates would be provided separately. So the Easter break then took place between Friday the 29th of March and Monday the 1st of April. At around 10 a.m. on the 2nd of April, the Post Office's legal representative contacted the inquiry legal team to note that further documents were to be expected. The Post Office requested a meeting with the inquiry to provide an update and discuss how the Post Office intended to disclose further documents. At 11:47 on the 2nd of April, the inquiry confirmed it would be grateful if the Post Office could please provide the inquiry with the information it should have or would be assisted in having in relation to the late disclosure that was relevant to hearings or witnesses this week. At 6:58 p.m. that day, the Post Office sent the inquiry a 4-page letter seeking, quote, to provide a brief update regarding the Post Office's further urgent witness-focused review to best assist the inquiry with anticipated timings for further productions. That letter's been provided to call participants, and I'm not going to repeat it. However, it was in this letter, received after hours on Tuesday, that the inquiry was informed that the Post Office intended to make, quote, a small number of further Burgess Salmon Field Fisher productions in the near future of further documents relevant to phases 5 and 6. It was said that most will be directly relevant to witnesses scheduled to appear later in April and then in May to July, but a limited amount will relate to witnesses scheduled to appear during this week, i.e. starting today. The letter said that the Post Office anticipated that the documents that relate to witnesses appearing this week are likely to be low in number and or not likely to contain many documents that will give rise to potential questions for those witnesses, but will rather, particularly for non-Post Office or Royal Mail Group witnesses, for the most part be documents that refer to them. Importantly, the letter said that the Post Office anticipated making yet further productions of material following 5 further reviews. It confirmed that the reviews were not related to the Microsoft Exchange remediation process, but as noted already, the documents were relevant to phases 5 and 6 and to witnesses scheduled to be called as early as this week. Those 5 reviews were summarised by the Post Office as follows. First, the third-party advisor and personal assistant review. Secondly, the NAS drive and file share review. Thirdly, the supplementary precautionary mimecast review arising from the phase 5 and 6 remediation review. The hard copy documents review, and finally the Patrick Bork 2017 Mimecast data review. The Post Office did not provide the numbers of documents for witnesses commencing this week, although they anticipated providing those numbers shortly. Between the 2nd of April and the 5th of April, the inquiry received 7 further letters about one or more of those reviews. Those letters have also been provided to core participants, and I shouldn't repeat them. Within those letters, the Post Office disclosed a number of additional documents as follows. On the 3rd of April, 196 documents were disclosed, said to be from the NAS drive. The Post Office said they were continuing to collect material from the Post Office file share that might be relevant to the phase 5 and 6 hearings. However, the inquiry understands such a measure to be out of an abundance of caution. Also on the 3rd of April, 3,188 documents were disclosed, said to be from, quote, further material identified from third-party advisor files and material identified as part of a second assurance review involving searches of email inboxes of personal assistants to Section 21(3) individuals and other inboxes of potential relevance where considered appropriate. This was further to the 1,071 documents already disclosed to the inquiry back on the 28th of March. On Friday, the 5th of April, so the Friday that's just passed, the Post Office disclosed 189 documents following a review of Post Office's hard copy material, 200 documents following an additional precautionary mimecast review. A further 374 documents were disclosed, said to be the third tranche of documents, including, quote, further material identified as part of a second assurance review involving searches of email inboxes of personal assistants to Section 21(3) individuals. This was in addition to the 1,071 documents disclosed on the 28th of March and the 3,188 documents disclosed 2 days further. The Post Office said that it was now, quote, urgently reviewing data for personal assistance to the Section 21(3) individuals who are witnesses and are due to give evidence from the 23rd of April onwards. And they anticipated they would provide the documents to the inquiry on or before this Friday, the 12th of April. So taking the 5 reviews about which the inquiry was informed on the 2nd of April in turn, I understand the position to be as follows. The third-party advisor and personal assistant review has seen the disclosure of a total of 4,633 documents since the 28th of March alone. The Post Office has told us that that review is not yet complete. The NAS drive and file share saw the disclosure of 196 documents from the NAS drive last week, but the review is ongoing in relation to other witnesses. The supplementary precautionary mimecast review arising from the phase 5-6 remediation review saw the disclosure of 200 documents, but that's now said to be complete. The hard copy documents review saw the disclosure of 189 documents last week. It's unclear if that review is complete or remains ongoing. The Patrick Bork 2017 Mimecast data work appears to be ongoing. We understand the data is being collected and processed urgently. The volume and timing of such disclosure is unknown, but the Post Office said that they were working to disclose any further documents well in advance of Patrick Bork's hearing on the 7th of May. So we in the inquiry team wish to inform you and the core participants of these developments without delay. They present issues with which the inquiry has become extremely and unfortunately familiar with over the past 3 years. I should also put the developments in a wider context. Since the end of the Phase 4 hearings alone, so that's since the closing submissions on the 2nd of February 2024, the Post Office has disclosed 73,720 documents to the inquiry, of which the inquiry legal team have characterised 67,210 documents as possibly relating to Phases 5 and 6 of the inquiry. The inquiry has received documents from other providers during that time, albeit none as substantial in volume as the Post Office. And the inquiry's information management team have confirmed that as of late yesterday, at least 78,211 documents, including but not limited to the Post Office's documents, that likely or potentially relate to Phases 5 and 6 of the inquiry may fall for disclosure to core participants. The matters that the inquiry is investigating span 2 decades and a number of detailed issues. In order to proceed with hearings in a meaningful way, the inquiry has needed to prioritise its disclosure to core participants and will continue to do so. It's with this in mind that we in the inquiry team specifically set deadlines for the receipt of the late exchange material likely to be relevant to the Phase 5 and 6 hearings on a witness-by-witness and week-by-week basis in order to ensure that the hearings could go ahead as planned. This was communicated to the Post Office, and the inquiry understood that the Post Office considered that it had completed its Phase 5-6 exchange remediation exercises by the 22nd of March. The obligation of disclosure to the inquiry is, of course, ongoing. The inquiry had expected, and indeed anticipated, ongoing disclosure from providers of documents in certain instances. Documents can be found late, hard copies or electronic files, or messages may turn up in unexpected devices. But the issues that the Post Office's disclosure to this inquiry have presented have been much more than minor, ad hoc, or additional disclosure. In particular, the Post Office's assurance review, as it has called it, of personal assistant emails and other inboxes of potential relevance in response to the inquiry's Section 21(3) notice of last year is very concerning. As I say, that notice was sent in July of last year. It lists a number of senior key Post Office individuals. Such individuals would undoubtedly communicate via their personal assistants. The inboxes of what are called inboxes of potential relevance have not been explained by the Post Office, so we don't know to whom they relate. Even more concerning, the inquiry emphasised that the Post Office ought to apply a common sense approach to senior custodians as far back as a meeting with the Post Office in April 2023. So you asked for your team closely to monitor the Post Office's disclosure to the inquiry. We have done so and will continue to do so. Whilst these new developments are, to use a parliamentary word, unwelcome, your team is not unprepared. We're committed to doing all that we can to ensure that the hearings can go ahead as planned. And subject to your views, that's what we intend to do, to continue with the hearings. The alternative, further delay to allow the Post Office to get its disclosure house in order, is not one which is acceptable. It of course follows from that approach that there may be a need to recall some witnesses to ask them questions about documents which have not been processed in time for them to be asked questions about such documents in the coming weeks. So that's the approach that we intend to take, and that's all I say at the moment about this latest late Post Office disclosure.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Beer. The substance or a summary of what Mr. Beer has just explained publicly was provided to me late last week, together with Mr. Beer's and his team's advice that despite the problems which have occurred, we should carry on. I've had the weekend to think about that, and also whether it would be necessary to invite core participants to provide their views to me about that. And the decision I have reached is as follows. First of all, I don't wish to hear from the core participants. And secondly, we're going to carry on. Now, that is perhaps a bold thing to do, because it does mean that there may be occasions in which witnesses are giving evidence where the documents haven't caught up with the witnesses, so to speak. And that is a highly undesirable state of affairs. But as Mr. Beer has explained, that can be cured, albeit with some cost to the witness, by recalling them if necessary. The alternative is to have a substantial break. And in my opinion, dare I say judgment, even though I'm not a judge anymore, that is not desirable. Make no mistake, everyone, I understand fully that the problems with disclosure are capable of creating very significant pressures for all the participants in the inquiry. But protracted adjournments so as to ensure that every relevant disclosable document is in the hands of all core participants prior to a witness giving evidence would also cause very damaging stresses to all the participants. And so I have to exercise judgment and come to a balanced decision. And as I've said, my view is that at the moment the problems are not such that we need to call a halt. And my intention is to continue with the evidence sessions in accordance with our published timetable, so far as is reasonably possible. I stress, as Mr. Beer has stressed, that the monitoring of disclosure, which I promised would continue throughout, will continue throughout. And if I deem it appropriate, I will certainly use one of our days off, a Monday or sometimes a Friday, to hold a disclosure hearing. So there's a threat to you all. I want to publicly acknowledge, and this is the last of the observations which I wish to make, that at least in part, I may be to blame for some of the problems relating to disclosure. There may be some in this room, in fact, there are some in this room, and certainly there are some in the inquiry team who consider that the timetables which I set for the hearing of evidence are unrealistically tight. On any view, the volume of material to be disclosed to the inquiry and then by the inquiry to core participants is enormous. I acknowledge that if the hearing phases had been spread out with greater breaks between them, as some have advocated, then some of the disclosure pressures would be eased. However, I am acutely conscious that this public inquiry has been in existence for very nearly 3 years. Although by the standards of some inquiries, that is a comparatively short period of time, I am unshakable in my belief that this inquiry should not last for a day longer than is strictly necessary. And if that means that the pace at which we proceed causes significant work pressures for us all, then I'm afraid that's a price we're all going to have to pay. So thank you for your words, Mr. Beer, and I think we're ready for some evidence.
Well, just before we do that, can I turn to a brighter note?
All right, a brighter note, thank you.
As you know, sir, and it was publicly announced by the inquiry on the 9th of January this year, the inquiry jointly appointed Dame Sandra Dawson and Dr. Katie Stewart to the role of governance expert witnesses. Dame Sandra is Professor Emerita of Management Studies, University College, Cambridge, and a Fellow, formerly the Master of Sydney Sussex College, Cambridge. She acted as an expert member on organisation, governance and leadership on the expert advisory group on the Windrush Lessons Learned Review, and regularly advises on leadership, governance and organisation structure. Dr. Stewart is a policy governance expert and was a visiting scholar at Sydney Sussex College, Cambridge. Dame Sandra and Dr. Stewart have been instructed to produce 2 reports addressing issues relating to leadership, management and governance. The first of those reports has been disclosed to core participants. It's dated the 27th of March 2024 and has the URN EXPG 606. It sets out the expected and best practice in relation to the standards of governance, management and leadership in companies such as the Post Office in the period 1999 to 2019. It's a substantial body of work, being 133 pages in length, including its appendices. A copy of that report, the first report, is to be treated as having read into the record today, and therefore a copy will be uploaded to the inquiry's website today. Dame Sandra and Dr. Stewart will be considering the evidence given in phases 5 and 6 of the inquiry, both the written evidence and the oral evidence, and will produce a second report in the light of that evidence when phases 5 and 6 have concluded.
Thank you, Mr. Beer. I think we can all agree that is a brighter note.
Can I call Alan Bates, please?
Yes, of course. Ah, he's appeared.
Sorry.
Right, repeat after me. I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the
and
truth.
nothing but the truth.
Right, take a seat.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, Mr. Bates.
Good morning.
My name is Jason Beer, as you know, and I ask questions on behalf of the inquiry. Can you tell us your full name, please?
Alan Bates.
Thank you very much for previously providing a comprehensive and detailed witness statement to the inquiry, and for coming to London today to give evidence to assist the inquiry in its work. Can we start by looking at your witness statement, please? Sure. It's the only hard copy document I'm going to be asking you to refer to. It's got, for the purposes of the transcript, the URN WITN 3050100, and it's up on the screen. It's 59 pages long, excluding the exhibits page, and is dated the 29th of February. I've picked up a couple of typos. I wonder whether we could just correct those first. If we look at page 23, and the foot of page 23 at paragraph 75, it says the CWU were not involved in this period, as I recall. The NFSP in the letter, should that say from Colin Baker?
Yes, it should.
Dated the 13th of January. So cross out the words January 200 and put in the words Baker, the word Baker. Yes?
Yes, please.
And page 32. Paragraph 102. It says in my letter to Mr. O'Neill, dated the 9th of September 2009, I think that should be 2004.
The original letter. Yes, it would be. Yes, you're right.
Yes. So can that be corrected to 2004? Thank you. If you can turn to page 59, please, in the hard copy. Do we see your signature there?
Yes, you do.
And with those two typos corrected, are the contents of the statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
They are.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bates. I'm not going to ask you questions about every aspect of your witness statement because it's long and detailed, and a copy of it will be uploaded to the inquiry's website today so the public can read it. Can I start? The statement can come down, please. Can I start with a little bit about your background? You tell us in your witness statement, it's paragraph 5, no need to turn it up, that before you became a sub-postmaster, you worked for 12 years in the heritage and leisure project management sector. Is that right?
That's correct.
And is it right that in the course of that work, you developed experience in electronic point of sale, EPOS systems?
Yes, I did.
You developed experience in the development of site-specific business software and the provision of staff IT training?
That's correct.
To what extent, if any, did that background assist you when you became a sub-postmaster and were later required to work with the Horizon IT system?
I think when Horizon came in, I think I was quite positive about it because I knew what technology and these sorts of systems could do. So I was quite positive. But I found it a bit frustrating once the system was installed and we were operating. I found there were many shortcomings in the system. And knowing what these systems could do, it just seemed a bit of a lost opportunity.
You were a sub-postmaster, I think, between the 31st of March 1998 and the 5th of November 2003.
Yes.
By my reckoning, so a period of 5.5 years or so.
That's correct.
And by comparison, if you don't mind me saying, to other sub-postmasters, that's a relatively short period, isn't it?
It is.
Sorry,
it is, but it's due to Post Office, not to myself.
Quite. And also, I suppose, ironically, you spent more than 4 times that period campaigning.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And why has that been necessary?
Because, well, initially it was because Post Office terminated my contract, giving me 3 months' notice and not giving me a reason for doing so. Purely because, in my belief, is that I kept raising problems and concerns over its Horizon system due to a number of faults I'd found over the years.
You tell us in your statement that you spent that period of time seeking justice, accountability and redress for not just yourself and your wife, but also on behalf of a much wider group of people. Is that right?
Yes, I did. Once I'd started my individual little campaign in there, we found others along the way, and eventually we all joined up, and so the JFSA was born, and onwards went the campaign.
You say in your witness statement that you have dedicated this part of my life to this cause. Is that how it has seemed or felt? That
Well,
firstly, that it's required dedication, but secondly, it's a cause.
Yeah, I think it's also stubbornness as well. But as you got to meet people and realised it wasn't just yourself, and you saw the harm and injustice that had been descended upon them, it was something that you felt you had to deal with. Sorry. It's something you felt you had to deal with. It's something you couldn't put down. And you had the support of the rest of the group in there as well. Sorry.
That's right. Do take a moment to clear the frog in your throat.
Yeah, I have. And, hopefully not a Welsh one. There we go. Yeah. Sorry.
Talking of which, you ran a post office in North Wales.
I did.
What was the name of the post office, and in which town was it?
It's Craigerdon Post Office in Llandudno.
Just say that again.
Craigerdon Post Office in Llandudno.
And what kind of post office?
Like me teasing him about Bosnia.
I see. Okay.
What kind of post office was it?
It was, well, it was a 3-position counter in that it was, when we first bought the property, it was very much at the back of the property in there, and it was a bit run down. And it also had another side, a retail side to the business, which was a whole variety of things: crafts, knitting, haberdashery, a whole range of things. So for the first year or two, we just ran the business as it was and slowly developed it from there, putting on a big extension, updating a lot of the stock. But more importantly, we actually saw it as a big potential to grow the post office business, and we brought it right to the front of the building, and with a large queuing area for people. Unfortunately, it seems what post offices need. And so we invested quite heavily in developing the post office, and that was at the time Horizon came in.
Thank you. And I think you and your wife, Suzanne, were 44 years old when you took it over, is that right?
About that, yes, would have been.
You tell us in your witness statement that there's no need to turn it up, it's paragraphs 9 to 13, okay, in summary terms, about your decision to become a sub-postmaster, your decision to pick this post office, your hopes and aspirations, and the process by which you applied and by which your application was approved. I just want to look at an account you've given in the past in more detail about that, sure, if we may. Can we look, please, on the screen at poll 302-4194? This is a witness statement you made in the course of the group litigation proceedings in the High Court. We'll deal more about that later today. Is that right?
Yes, it is, yes.
And we can see the date on it in the top right, 9th of August 2018. And so this witness statement was made for the purposes of what came to be known as the Common Issues Trial, is that right?
That's correct.
And so the process by which you applied to become a sub-postmaster, the documents that were, or in fact were not given to you, were important issues and addressed in this witness statement in very great detail, is that right?
That is right, yeah.
Can we look, please, at page 3? And pick up at paragraph 11, please. You say a key attraction to working with the Post Office was that it would provide secure employment based upon the fact it provides a community service and has an established brand in the community. From among the various small business options available, a post office branch would, in my mind, be a safe option. I was also encouraged by the fact I could run a secondary business, such as a retail shop, alongside the post office branch. That sets out in summary your reasons for picking post office as a future enterprise with your wife. Is that right?
That's correct.
Now, paragraph 12 on this page, right through to paragraph 23 on page 5, addresses the initial inquiries you made with the existing or the outgoing sub-postmaster, Peter Savage, I think his name was.
That's correct.
And the planned visits that you made, and indeed some unannounced visits that you made to the post office in question as part of your due diligence. Is that right?
That's correct.
Can we just look at paragraph 21 on page 5, please? You say that you do remember that during one of my visits to the branch, Mr. Savage explained that he had a practice of keeping unders and overs in a tin in the safe as a system to deal with any odd shorts or overs. I remember this because I thought it to be rather casual and unusual for a business. Nevertheless, I was not particularly concerned and considered it to be a matter for Mr. Savage and his staff, and I didn't understand it to involve large figures or to be problematic. Is that right?
That is right, and it was very odd and very strange, I thought, for a cash-based system, where you didn't actually record anywhere the amounts, and you didn't provide post office with returns of the position each week in there as well. But that seemed to be the way it operated.
But these were small sums of money, is that?
They were small sums of money. Yeah.
From paragraph 24, if we scroll down, please. Right through to paragraph 33 at the bottom of page 7, you deal with the agreement to purchase the post office. Yes?
Yes.
And then if we go forward to page 8, please. From paragraph 34 on this page, right through to paragraph 86 on page 19, you deal with the following issues. I'm just going to summarise them without reading the text. Firstly, the application to the post office to be a sub-postmaster. Secondly, the interview at the regional office in Bangor that you and your wife attended. Thirdly, the confirmation that your application had been successful and the material that you were then given. Yes?
Yes.
And if we just go forward to page 15, please. And look at paragraph 62, you say, at no stage during the process of my application, appointment and branch opening was I ever sent a copy of the sub-postmaster contract. I first obtained a copy of the sub-postmaster contract much later in circumstances I explained below. At no point during my appointment process was it mentioned or explained to me that the sub-postmaster contract, which was a lengthy document of 114 pages, governed the terms of my appointment. Now, we'll hear later that, is this right, that the post office robustly challenged you on that issue alongside other issues at the trial, and then the trial judge, then Mr. Justice Fraser, held that you were an honest witness, that you were telling the truth, and that, like many other sub-postmasters, you did not receive a copy of this document.
That's correct.
You address later in this section of your witness statement your initial classroom training, and then lastly, the transfer of the branch to you and the opening of it. Correct?
Correct, yes.
Can we turn to the introduction of the Horizon system into your branch? And can we go to your inquiry witness statement, please? At page 5. Paragraph 14, you tell us that in October 2000, the Post Office introduced Horizon at my branch and imposed upon me the requirement that I use it to record transactions at the branch and to submit branch accounts. To the best of my recollection, Horizon was installed from the 2nd of October 2000. I remember the branch was closed around this time to allow for this. Horizon installed under 2 years after you took up the position of sub-postmaster of this office.
Correct.
And then scroll down to 15, please. You say, I didn't have any involvement in discussions about the introduction of Horizon. I had no choice but to accept and accommodate this variation. Obviously, this was also a huge change in how I operated the branch, as many of the previous processes that I'd been trained on and had operated at the branch were made obsolete, not only for me, but also for my assistants. Paragraph 16, please. You say, when Horizon was introduced, given my background with electronic point of sale systems, I regarded the introduction of Horizon at first as a positive innovation, and you've told us that in summary this morning. However, I did not expect there to be any apparent discrepancies shown on the system that I was unable to identify the cause of and resolve, either by myself or with support or information from Post Office Limited. Certainly, I did not expect discrepancies to occur for which the Post Office would try and hold me liable without the cause being investigated and established. To that point, I'd been preparing accounts manually using the capture system. Just going back to what you say on the previous page, you say in the third line, I didn't expect there to be any apparent discrepancies shown on the system that you were unable to identify the cause of and resolve. What do you mean by that?
Well, I expected to be able to track down any transaction that I'd undertaken, myself or my staff had undertaken at the branch. One way or another. There are a variety of ways of interrogating systems and the data on the systems, and I presumed that the system would enable you to do that at the outset. But, I mean, in previous roles, before Post Office, I'd use something like crystal reports on software packages to extract information using certain parameters in there. But there was very little flexibility in Horizon, as I saw it at that time, for reports that you could control the parameters of your searches for. There were a set of reports, don't get me wrong, there were a set that were already built into the system, but they were quite restrictive in there, and it did seem to cause problems.
And we see this as a feature in the correspondence that we're going to turn to a little later today, and a constant theme that you pursued, i.e. the visibility of transactions and the auditability of transactions from a sub-postmaster's perspective was lacking in the Horizon system. Is that correct?
Very much so, yeah.
Can we turn, please, back to your High Court statement, poll 302-4194. And turn to page 32, please. Can we pick it up at paragraph 144? You say that you've been referred to a part of the Post Office's defence and to its defence and counterclaim. And you say that you understand from this that the Post Office's case for the purposes of the Common Issues trial is, quote, that losses do not arise in the ordinary course of things without fault or error on the part of sub-postmasters and their assistants. And, this is what the Post Office said, it would not be right to infer or presume that a shortfall and loss was caused instead by a bug or error in Horizon. And, quote, that the truth of whether a shortfall did or did not result from losses for which the sub-postmaster was responsible, quote, lies peculiarly within the knowledge of sub-postmasters as the person with the responsibility for branch operation and the conduct of transactions in branches. You say, these things were in my own experience very far from the case. And then you set out from your own experience, by comparison, what you say by reference to what the Post Office suggests. Can we look at paragraph 145, please? You say, I didn't expect there to be any apparent shortfalls that you were unable to identify. That's essentially what you said in your inquiry witness statement. And then 146, you say, one of my fundamental concerns when Horizon was introduced, which you clearly communicated through various letters, was the lack of transparency and control available to me in reviewing transactions when trying to balance. You refer to a letter, And you say, I could not fully access data that I needed in order to properly track and, if necessary, to correct transactions. Your concerns came to a head in December 2000 following a particularly difficult balance. You were therefore dependent, you say, upon the Post Office for this sort of information, and therefore in order to ascertain the cause of any apparent shortfall and whether it was in fact a real loss. And then you say in 147, although Post Office later moved to monthly balancing, during your tenure you were required to produce weekly accounts, which meant you had to conduct a balance on a weekly basis on a Wednesday. When carrying out this balance on Wednesday the 13th of December 2000, the Horizon system showed there was an unexplained variance of over £6,000 relating to gyro deposits. That can come down, thank you. So the first substantial unexplained variance was over £6,000, is that right?
Yes, and it was only a number of weeks after the system had gone live.
Well, I was going to ask you that. System live about the 2nd of October.
Yeah.
We're now talking about the 13th of December, so 2 months or so after the system had been installed, this variance arose.
Yes.
If we go back to paragraph 148, please, of poll 3024194. So over the page, please. Thank you. You say, as you mentioned in a paragraph above, I contacted the helpline seeking support and help as to why this apparent variance had occurred. They were unable to assist in any meaningful way. I tried to investigate the matter myself. I printed various reports from 2 of my 3 counter terminals. I left the 3rd terminal for use to serve customers, who, as we were very busy in the branch, with customers queuing out of the door. You cross-refer back to paragraph 143.1. I'm not going to go there, but essentially you tell us in that paragraph that on that day, the 13th of December 2000, you contacted the helpline 7 times, is that right?
That's correct.
And one of the calls was about an hour in length.
Yeah.
And were they of any assistance at all in that in those 7 calls?
Not really. Stating the bleeding obvious, I think, really is one description I might use. But it was all things that I'd tried.
Did they suggest anything?
No, and the other impression I got is they couldn't access the system any further than I could at that time.
And just by way of an aside, I think you tell us in your statement that Post Office records subsequently disclosed to you show that in the 2-year and 9-month period up until November 2003, i.e. when your contract was terminated, you and your assistants made 507 calls to the helpline.
Correct.
Of which 85 related to Horizon and balancing problems.
Yes.
And that you found the helpline to be ineffective and indeed of no help.
Very much so, and often we never bothered ringing it.
Can we go on to paragraph 149 of your High Court witness statement here? You say, using the limited reports you were able to print, you ascertained that around £5,000 of the alleged shortfall related to gyro items that had become wrongly duplicated on Horizon. These reports were in the form of lengthy, multi-line, narrow till receipts and were many metres long, making them difficult to review in any event. At the time, I believe that a majority of the remaining alleged shortfall, being £1,182.81, was also attributable to gyro errors. However, I was unable to track these potentially smaller sums in the absence of proper reporting functions on Horizon. Therefore, far from being within my knowledge, I was unable to ascertain the root cause of the apparent shortfall at all. You had your thoughts, which you set out later. I also called my retail network manager, Jerry Hayes, the following day to inform him. in the absence of a proper response from the post office, I carried over the apparent shortfall from that week's cash account to the following week's cash account by transferring it to a suspense account, which was visible to the post office. So £5,000 of the £6,000 was attributable to wrongly duplicated gyros. The loss which had been left, about £1,100, you couldn't account for on the information available to you. And is it that sum, £1,100, that you ended up in dispute with the post office over?
At that time, yes, it was, yeah.
And I think the first thing you did was to write a detailed letter to the post office about it.
I did. Yeah.
Can we look at that, please? Poll 404598. At page 134, please. We can see this is dated the 19th of December 2000, so about 6 days after the balancing issue emerged, and again about 2 and a bit months after the installation of Horizon at your branch. And it must be noted, I think, very early in the life of the Horizon system taken as a whole. Would you agree?
Yes, I would.
You'll see that the heading of it is Horizon faults. Can we read the letter together, because this sets out what might be an important account early in the life of Horizon. You refer back in the first paragraph to a conversation, and as is good practice, you confirmed it in detail in writing. You say the balance at this office on the 13th was not only very stressful, but also very worrying. The evidence that appeared during that day proved beyond any doubt that the Horizon system cannot be relied upon to give 100% accurate figures. The problem which was highlighted to this office that day was with regard to gyro deposits, and at one point the weekly returns were showing a variance to the addition of the daily returns of over £6,000. The whole of that afternoon was spent making a number of phone calls to the different helplines, one of almost 1 hour long, and kept 2 of the 3 terminals producing nothing but reports at a peak trading time when we had queues out of the door, although eventually I did manage to track down the majority of the money. That said, the cash account for that week is still showing a shortage of 118281. I can without any doubt attribute 36850 of that to gyro items that have been double entered and that I'm unable to track because of the way Horizon is set up. Of the remaining 81431 shortage, I'm presuming that 40915 of that shortage is from the previous week that's become added to the total. This leaves a difference of 40516, which I'm unsure of where it comes from. It may well be a gyro system error, as might be the previous week's 40915 shortage, or it may be something else. Unfortunately, the current Horizon system does not let you access previous transactions adequately enough to track problems with shorts or overs at the end of the week. Continuing. Having spoken to the local branch secretary of the Federation of Sub-Postmasters on these problems and realising the problems I'm experiencing are being found by others around the country, I really do not believe it would be unreasonable for Post Office Network to hold me liable for losses on the cash account until such time as 100% guarantee can be given about the accuracy of Horizon. I've been hoping to leave any comments in writing about Horizon until the office is quieter in January, and then write a detailed submission about the costs we've incurred with it, around £1,000, the problems with the counter, staff working with money and stamp books on chairs or on the shelf behind them, the very poor layout of the screen and menus, the slowness of the printers, the lack of report writing facilities, the chaotic end of day and end of week procedures, and the problems of having to do, quote, office work at a terminal on the counter. Given time, I shall produce the report for you. Please do not think that I'm being nothing but negative about the system. I'm a firm believer in the way forward through such a system. But bear in mind my comments are made by someone who's had considerable experience of electronic point of sale systems before joining the Post Office in 1998. I first began working with them in 1986 and have used a variety of systems. Reading on, so I do have some insight into those systems, and I would gladly be willing to offer constructive feedback if asked. With regard to the current deficit showing on our cash account for last week, how do you want me to progress this week's balance? Should I just roll it through and see what happens, or what? And then you ask for assistance. So in that letter, you make it clear on a number of occasions that Horizon is at fault, and you explain in detail why, so far as you could tell, that was so. Is that right?
That's correct.
You tell the Post Office that you're not alone and that this was happening around the country.
That's what I understood, yeah.
Did that information come from your local branch secretary at the NFSP?
It did.
Was that Dave Foster?
It was Dave Foster.
And you ask a question, what should I do at the end?
Yes.
Did you ever get a reply, a written reply, to the raft of the points?
Sorry, no, I never did.
No reply to this letter at all?
Never.
Can we move on, please, to page 140 in this bundle? This is a follow-up letter of the 7th of January 2002. So now over a year has passed. And you're writing to the Post Office about this long in the tooth alleged shortfall. And you say, as you're aware, the cash account for this office is still showing an amount of 104,186 in the suspense account. This cumulative figure was placed in the suspense account towards the end of 2000. And I have no doubt at all that it was due to errors in the Horizon system over a number of weeks at that time. In my letters to Jerry Hayes of the 19th of December, which we've just looked at, 16th of July 2001, I've skipped over that one because of time, neither of which did I receive a written reply to. I gave further details on this matter. I really do think that enough time has now passed for Post Office to have resolved this issue, and that unless I receive a written comment to the contrary by the end of this month, I'll take it the matter's closed. When I signed my contract with Post Office counters, I did not sign to accept the liabilities arising from the shortcomings of a less than adequate Horizon system. All liabilities from such a system are clearly the responsibility of Post Office Limited or ICL Pathway. Allowing this issue to drag on not only continues the stress and strain of the original problems, but I fear also continually cast doubt over my honesty and that of my staff. Therefore, I greatly appreciated it if you would bring this matter to a head in order that we can move on. Can we turn to your inquiry witness statement, please? At paragraphs 39 and 40, which are on page 12. You say, finally, by letter of the 6th of March 2002, I was notified that, quote, Post Office has decided to take no further action in respect of the loss at my branch, and that this will be written off. No reason was given, but I've since seen a copy of a, quote, write-off authority voucher disclosed by the Post Office, which gives the reason for the write-off as, quote, disputed Horizon cash account shortage. The letter of the 6th of March also said that the Post Office had taken time to respond because, quote, it has been necessary to formulate a consistent response to all such cases. I take it from this that the Post Office was aware at the time of many such complaints. I also take from the fact that the Post Office was willing to write off the considerable apparent discrepancy I disputed, that my complaints were valid, and that the Post Office was aware that was the case and wished to avoid the controversy on this matter, given that I was willing to assert my legal rights. Can we turn up, please, poll 404598 at page 143, please. We should just look back at page 142, please. This is the letter of the 6th of March 2002 that you were referring to in your witness statement.
Yes.
And if we look at the third paragraph, there's the passage that you cited: after due consideration of the facts surrounding your loss in your report, Post Office has decided to take no further action in respect of the loss, which will be written off. And the write-off authority, if we just look at the second page that was included, if we just scroll down a little bit. Thank you. This is the unsigned version, essentially. I've received a write-off authority voucher to the value of the amount which has been cleared from my suspense account, and the voucher has been cleared in the appropriate manner in the cash account number, week number, I'm sorry. Was that amount, 104186, actually cleared out of your suspense account, so you went back to zero in balancing terms?
Yes, yes, I did.
So it didn't remain thereafter a shortfall which you were required to roll over?
No.
And then can we look at the loss authorization document, which you also referred to in your witness statement? That's poll 00328099. Page 3, please. I think this is the loss authorization document. If we just pan out so we can see all of it, please. I don't think this is something that you saw at the time, is that right? This is an internal Post Office document.
That's correct.
But you got disclosure of it later, is that right?
That's right.
And we'll see that it seems to be in standard form. It's got your branch name and your FAD code, the amount of money. And it says the following decision has been made with regard to the loss at the above office, which relates to an aged shortage, which the sub-postmaster insists was attributable to a Horizon system software equipment training failure. And then three options are given. The second of which was the sub-postmaster makes it good. The third of which an amount of it must be made good, an amount of it will be written off, and the first of which was the full amount will be written off, and the sub-postmaster has been sent the appropriate voucher with which to clear the loss of the amount. Yes?
Yes.
Did you see this document, that the writing off of a loss because you said the loss was attributable to the Horizon system at the time of the dispute with the Post Office in 2002 and 2003, i.e. before termination of your contract?
No, I didn't see it.
And so were you aware at that time that the Post Office seemingly used the standard form with delete as appropriate boxes on it?
No, I didn't, but now that you mention it, I do recall a conversation that the retail network manager had at the time with this department at my office. So I only heard one side of the conversation, and it was about arranging for this write-off amount or a write-off voucher. And I seem to recall, and it's stuck in memory because of what it was. He said, oh, it's another one, the Horizon losses. And it's just one of those little things that, you know, sticks in the back of your mind that was said at the time when the retail manager was speaking to this department on the phone, arranging the voucher.
in any event, there existed a form in which a loss could be authorised to be written off on the grounds that the sub-postmaster said the loss was attributable to Horizon.
Yes, it did.
And that's what happened in your case.
Yes.
Thank you. That can come down. Now, before you had authorisation to write this loss off, you continued to roll it over from week to week.
Yes, I did.
And was that done with the knowledge and approval of your then retail line manager?
Well, they were aware of it. They certainly informed that that's what I was doing. So,
we've heard from some post office staff the evidence of Susan Harding springs to mind, particularly to me. The post office believed that the suspense account was used by sub-postmasters to cover up theft and fraud. Your evidence is that you were being transparent from an early stage in the life of Horizon in your complaints about Horizon discrepancies, about the use of the suspense account to hold over disputed sums whilst continuing to assert that the money wasn't owed and ought not to be made good. Is that right?
that's correct.
Did there come a time when that practice was challenged?
Not during my tenure. I understand it was later on.
I think after this write-off, there continued to be some shortfalls shown on Horizon. Is that right?
That's right, yes. Well, it's not just, sorry, you say shortages. It was also overs and unders. It was
So surpluses as well?
surpluses, yeah.
And did you seek to discover the cause of both the surpluses and the shortages?
Yes, as much as we could.
And did you encounter success?
On occasion, yes.
Did it remain the case, however, that a sum just over £1,000 was carried as a shortage in the suspense account?
No, not to my recollection. There was a claim at the very end of my contract that I think they said that the office was owing something in the region of £1,200 or £1,400. But
It's that I'm referring to.
sorry,
It's that I was referring to.
yeah, no, but that wasn't carried out such. What happened was that I refused to. When we undertook our weekly balance, you were then meant to put in money to make up to the figure or take money out if it was over in there. I refused to do that. I rolled through the shortages or the losses in there. Shortages or the overs each time. So it had a running total. It was adjusted from week to week because I really did not know where the office was up to. You know, I had no idea. So, and often some of these where there had been an error might come back in a week or 2 weeks or something of that sort of time, or it could be a lot longer. When the actual error was discovered elsewhere and it can be corrected. But no, I never actually reset or zeroed the system, but I just kept rolling through the shortages and losses. And Post Office were aware of what I was doing.
Did the installation of a new retail line manager, Mike Wakely, cause matters to be brought to a head in that respect?
Eventually, yes.
And can we look at that eventually? Poll 404598, page 144, please. This is a letter to you dated the 14th of April 2003, reference losses and gains. Just want to read the first part of the first paragraph. Further to our conversation, you confirm that you've been rolling over losses and gains for the past 2 years or more. That's what you've just described.
Yes.
He says, I was unaware of this practice. And then in the second paragraph, he says, I'm now instructing you that with immediate effect, you're required to make good the outstanding loss and to cease with this current practice of rolling over any losses and gains. Can we see your reply, please? Page 145. You say, I'm in receipt of your letter, the 14th of April, that's the one we've just read, confirming our conversation regarding losses and gains at our office, which have always been rolled over since the installation of Horizon. I appreciate you may well have been unaware of this practice at the office, but can assure you that many others at post office, many other post office staff knew of it. My comments regarding this are all well documented in a number of letters, such as that dated the 19th of December, which, like all letters, was sent recorded delivery. The problem with rolling over the losses and gains is that I presume I'd be accepting liability for them, which is something that I've pointed out in writing to you since the introduction of Horizon here. I'm unable to do until such time as I'm able to access the data that I'm being asked to be responsible for. As I've written previously, the totally inadequate report system has been made so complex it lacks the ability to interrogate the system when you know the information is inside. If I'm unable to access the data to check items, it's totally unreasonable to expect me to accept liability from uncheckable data. I think that reply speaks for itself. But did this exchange of correspondence, the new-ish, I think, retail line manager raising the issue, requiring you to make good the shortfall, to cease the practice, ultimately lead to your contract being terminated?
I believe so, yes.
Can we look, please, at page 147 of this bundle? Letter from Mr. Wakely, 2nd of May, scroll down. Thank you for your letter of the 16th of April. That's the one we've just looked at, the contents of which have been noted. Nevertheless, I must point out that you are bound by the terms and conditions of your contract for services, which was acknowledged by you on the 31st of March 2003, and somebody's written in not correctly, I think 1998. That was you, was it?
Yes.
1998, exclamation mark. Accepting your appointment. To this effect, you're charged with ensuring that all accounts entrusted to you are kept in the form prescribed by Post Office using the approved accounting system. And therefore, in the event of any losses occurring, these should be made good without delay. Accordingly, failure to comply with these obligations can be construed as a breach of contract, which could ultimately put your contract for services at risk. Over the page, I therefore request that you acknowledge the content of the letter within 10 days of its posting, confirming that the accounts are being maintained in the correct fashion, and make good the losses as per your contractual obligations. And then 149, please. Your reply to that letter. With regard to your letter of the 2nd of May, the first paragraph, I think you pick him up on the typo. You refer me to section 12 of the contract, and rather than what he has suggested to you, you're liable to repay all losses, you point out that section 12 in fact states the sub-postmaster is responsible for all losses caused through his own negligence, carelessness or error, and also for losses of all kinds caused by his assistants. Deficiencies due to such losses must be made good without delay. You rightly point out that I've agreed these terms. I confirm I gladly make good any losses caused in these manner. But I can see nothing in this clause which states that I'm also liable for data I'm unable to check. And that's a summary of the position that you had been maintaining, I think, consistently since installation.
Yes.
To take an extreme, if the Horizon system said I owed £1 million, would you say I'd have to make good the loss without delay and without question? There's no way I will agree to be held responsible for data I have input until such time as I'm able to access the data that I'm being asked to be responsible for. In trying to state that I've acknowledged such things as terms and conditions of my contract, you're in effect purporting to vary this contract. We can skip over the next paragraphs, which are about something else. and then go to the next page, 148. Sorry, 150. And then the letter ends. So you correct the post office on the terms and conditions. You make it clear the point that many have missed, that the contract does not oblige you to repay all losses. And then you make a point of emphasis, the £1 million example in your third paragraph. Was there any effort by the post office to engage with the points that you were making in this letter?
None at all, never addressed them.
Can we turn, please, to poll 404598, page 30. That's the same bundle, page 30. Scroll down, please. Mr. Wakely, in accordance with your contract, I'm writing to issue you with 3 months' notice of termination of your contract. The termination will take effect on the 5th of November 2003. So this is the letter that brought your contract to an end, is that right?
That is correct, yes.
The letter, of course, speaks for itself. It gave you no explanation for the reason for termination of your contract.
That's correct, yep.
But was any such explanation given to you by the post office at this time?
Never.
It may seem an insensitive question, but how did receiving this notice make you feel?
Well, I was annoyed with them, but to put it mildly, but I think it was partly expected in a way, because it was pretty obvious they were determined to, they were after me one way or another, and the build-up of correspondence over the period was certainly pointing in that direction. But I always found it quite interesting that I pulled them up on the point about trying to terminate my contract under clause 12 of the contract. But they didn't do it that way. They decided to go just under this, any reason they wanted, 3 months' notice without giving a reason.
So it's a without fault, without reason.
That's right. Yeah.
Termination, just on 3 months' written notice.
Yeah, that's it.
But you'd had the £1,100 written off.
Mm-hmm.
You'd had the post office acknowledging that it was because of a genuine dispute over whether Horizon was to blame for it, over the operation of Horizon. You'd been rolling over other shortfalls and surpluses since then with post office knowledge, and then this arrives.
Well, it was it was a bit strange in a way, because we were a very busy post office. In fact, it was a time when a lot of post offices were losing trade, but our sales figures were extremely high in the region. We developed a lot of new business in there. But, it was their decision to do it, and so be it. I mean, I did offer at one point, when there were discussions between the retail manager and myself, when we were heading in this direction. He was saying, come on, Alan, change your mind, do this, do that, and all the rest of it. And I would say, look, if you're unhappy with the way that I'm providing your service, then pay us back our initial investment and take the post office away. I would have been quite happy for them to do that. And I probably wouldn't have been here today on that basis. But, I mean, they just decided they were going to, I felt, they were going to make a lesson of my case, because a number of other people knew what was going on at that time. And I think it was something the post office liked to try and give lessons of how they were in charge.
Can we just look before the morning break at some reasoning that the post office gave subsequently for terminating your contract? To start with, can we look at poll 00107538? And page 11, please. This is a letter written to an MP, Betty Williams, in relation to a letter that she wrote as a constituency MP to Alan Layton, the then chairman of the Post Office. And it's the 29th of October. If we just go to the second page, scroll down, we can see who it's written by. Dave Barrett, Head of Commercial Urban Area for Wales, the Marches and Merseyside. Back to page 1. And look at the second paragraph. Briefly, we've given notice to Mr. Bates, the present sub-postmaster, that we're withdrawing from our contract with him. And then this is because we've lost confidence in his willingness to conduct the job in the manner expected. Was that ever explained to you, that they had lost confidence in your willingness to conduct the job in the manner expected? Can we look, please, at poll 303 1815? This is a presentation on horizon integrity prepared by Dave Smith. It's undated, and it seeks to tell a story about the integrity of Horizon. We may find in due course an interesting account overall, but I just want to look at what it says about you on page 6. And scroll down, please. Mr. Smith says, of the cases I'm aware, Bates had discrepancies, was dismissed because he became unmanageable. Was that ever explained to you, that you became unmanageable?
No, not at all.
And then Mr. Smith says of you that you, quote, clearly struggled with accounting and despite copious support, did not follow instructions. Firstly, did you struggle with accounting?
No, not at all.
Were you given copious support?
No.
Did you seek to follow the instructions that you had been given by the Post Office?
Basically try and bankrupt myself. No, I didn't, not to that extent.
If these, that can come down, thank you. If these after the fact reasons or justifications for the termination of your contract are not, on your understanding, correct, what do you understand to be the reason for the termination of your contract?
Well, I mean, basically, I think it was because, A, they didn't like me standing up to them in the first instance. B, they were finding it awkward. And C, I don't think they could answer these questions. And I think they had a feeling I was going to carry on in a similar vein going forward.
Just lastly then, can we look at poll 302 4194? This is your witness statement. Can we look at paragraph 170? I'm afraid I haven't written which page that is. Try about 25. Hopeless. Try about 30. Try about 35. And then if you can scroll forward to paragraph 170, please. You say this is your High Court statement for the GLO Common Issues trial. I've little doubt that the reason for my termination is that I had not only uncovered limitations and potential errors with the Horizon system, but that I continued to question the Post Office on the contractual relationship between sub-postmasters and the Post Office. Was that your belief at the time?
Yeah, it's a good summary of how I felt.
Does it remain your belief now?
Oh, yes.
Mr. Bates, thank you. Can we take the morning break, please? There's a slight glitch with the transcription service, which I think means we need to take 20 minutes rather than our usual 15.
All right, so what time shall we resume?
I think that means 5 to.
5 to 12. All right, see you all then.
So good morning. If we continue, please,
Yeah.
Mr. Bates, with August 2003, you remember where we are in the narrative. You've been given notice of termination of your contract. And I think one of the first things you did was to write to the chairman of the Royal Mail Group PLC. Is that right?
That's correct.
Can we look at that letter, please? Poll 0010 7538. We'll see that this is dated the 7th of August 2003 to Mr. Alan Leighton, Chairman of Royal Mail Group PLC. We'll look at the detail in a moment, but can I ask you in general terms what the purpose was in writing to the Chairman of Royal Mail Group PLC? By this time you'd received Post Office's decision to terminate your contract. What was the point?
Well, I was still in post, if you like, for the next few months. So I thought it was well worth trying to write to the chairman to make him aware of what was going on, because he may well have not known. So I thought, hoping that he might be able to undertake some sort of review into it and look at the case for us or whatever, take it on board a little bit more seriously.
This is, of course, still taking a step back, relatively early in the entire narrative of the scandal, August 2003. Horizon had only been rolled out for 3 years or so.
Yeah, but it was wrong. Sorry, I knew it was wrong then. There were things wrong with it. And having heard that others had had problems with it as well, surely someone should have been looking at all of this and taking these things into consideration.
Well, in that sense, you're obviously right, because many people were yet to be terminated. Many people were yet to be prosecuted. Many people were yet to be convicted, and many people were yet to go to prison. Can we look at what you said to the chairman? First paragraph. I'm writing to you with regard to a letter I've just received from Post Office Limited giving me formal notification of their decision to terminate my sub-postmaster contract. As chairman of the group responsible for Post Office Limited, I thought important that you should be aware of what is being undertaken in your name. You very much personalised things in that first paragraph.
Yes.
Did you expect this letter to at least be seen by the person to whom you wrote it?
I certainly hoped it would be. I can't do more than draw their attention to it. I can't force them to read it, but if you don't write to them, then they'll never know.
Paragraph 2. Please find enclosed a copy of that letter as well as copies of previous correspondence and notes regarding the problems in question. I'm not going to go through the previous correspondence or your notes upon it, which I've tried to keep in a chronological order. In reality, this matter should never have reached this stage, but the extremely poor handling by Post Office management in the past has led to the situation which could result in us not only losing our business but something else. Unlike the Post Office, I do not have endless funds to fight this injustice through the courts. Why was that in your mind at that stage, the relative funds available to each side to fight a case through the courts?
Well, I suppose realistically I have been speaking with lawyers at that time, and I was being advised that you probably wouldn't be able to afford to take Post Office on. It just, it was just an impractical situation from a financial point of view more than anything else, regardless of the case.
Moving on to paragraph, the rest of the paragraph, I do realise it's imperative for as many people as possible to have an opportunity to see the, in detail, the management style applied by Royal Mail Group. to the very public face of the local post office. It's again trying to use what seems to be so often described in its outdated Stalinistic management approach in order to bludgeon its will onto the poor sub-postmaster with an issue that could bankrupt every sub-post office in the country. Whilst I appreciate that principles can be expensive, I cannot agree to any position which would leave me and every other sub-postmaster liable for claims of millions of pounds from the post office without any redress or access to data to check such claims. Is that a reference to the auditability or visibility, the reporting function available to sub-postmasters on the system?
Well, certainly the lack of it, yes.
My only defence, until I can find an organisation willing to offer support, is to ensure that the media and all those politicians who represent a ward with a sub-post office, as well as everyone who runs a sub-post office or who uses one, has an opportunity to read all the facts. To that end, these documents enclosed and others will shortly be available online once the hoarding for the front of our building advertising our website, www.postofficevictims.org.uk, is ready in a week or so. Originally, I'd registered Post Office Victim at .me.uk to use, but as the launch will undoubtedly bring up many other cases from across the country, it was thought a larger and less personal site would be more appropriate. Over the page. It's important to make clear I've not breached my contract. I will not be ceasing to trade on the 5th of November 2003. If I did, I certainly would be in breach of my terms. If you read the enclosed documentation, it's all self-evident. I'm sure you can tell my back is up against a wall, but until the hoarding is ready and in place and all the web pages are downloaded to the server, I welcome any option that will resolve this matter with a minimum of fuss without the national publicity this issue is bound to draw. Hence my letter to you as a last attempt to reach a sensible conclusion. Now, I don't think you got a reply from Mr. Leighton, did you?
No, I got one from his office. Somebody did acknowledge it, if I recall.
Can we look at poll 304-0354? You can see this is the 27th of August. Thank you for your letter dated the 7th of August addressed to Alan Leighton, which has been forwarded to me for reply. Can we look at the second page, please? And scroll down. You can see that it's from somebody in the operations department, Rhea McQueen, a case liaison manager. Go back to the first page, please. And then if we look in the second paragraph, she says, I've now completed my inquiries. They've taken longer than expected. And she says, I've spoken with a number of the personnel involved in the search for a solution to the situation at the branch, although I regret that the situation has reached the point of termination of your contract. Quote, I am confident that the various teams concerned in the events have worked hard to provide support and assistance to you in a consistent and sympathetic manner. Was that your experience?
No, but this is Post Office's view, it's not mine.
This support included a number of on-site attendances to assist with balancing. Did that occur?
I had 2 people visit to try and assist with balancing, but they could access the system no further than I could, so there was absolutely no help at all.
And also to provide extra training on the Horizon system. Did you get additional training on the Horizon system?
Not that I can recall.
The aim was always that of achieving a solution to the difficulties you were experiencing in managing transactions and processes at the branch. The Horizon system at the branch has been reviewed and interrogated in response to your complaints, and the reports from the Horizon Field Support Team and the MBSC have confirmed that there's nothing inherently wrong with the Horizon system installed at the branch. But was the system installed at your branch, to your knowledge, reviewed and interrogated?
Not that I'm aware of. No one ever came to the place. And I've always been confused over nothing inherently wrong. That turn of phrase, it just seems a little unusual. Nothing wrong, I can understand, but inherently wrong. It seems like a back-covering sort of phrase.
And then read on, please. If we scroll down, thank you. The sub-postmaster contract is clear on the requirement that postmasters must make good loss or gains when misbalances occur. In fact, it isn't clear on that at all. That's a complete misstatement of the contract. It's evident you've consistently refused to do this, even when specifically requested to do so by the area management team. The contract also states that either party may terminate it with 3 months' notice without a reason being given. That's what we've done. And then I'm sure you've carefully considered the idea of your website. I feel you should be aware that the use of the Post Office Limited's imagery on your website may constitute trademark infringement. You say in your witness statement that despite you having sent the chairman a full clip of the relevant correspondence with notes about each item within it, to quote your witness statement, predictably, the response of the post office was to ignore the content and predictably to fail to investigate the real issues. Why, in your view, was it that the predictable response of the post office?
It was the way they tried to deal with things, which you experienced through their area manager. I mean, it was constantly, a post office was in the right and you were always in the wrong, and it just seemed to be their nature.
You tell us in your witness statement that this reply was the, quote, usual box-ticking exercise written entirely from the post office's perspective.
Of course, yeah, that's what it was.
The last paragraph concludes, the management team has been wholly professional in the management, deliberation and investigation of your issues. Had, in fact, the issues that you raised been investigated at all?
Not that I'm aware of.
Can we turn to paragraph 52 of your witness statement, please? Your inquiry witness statement, which is page 16. We asked you a question, what data you believe you needed to access in order to determine the cause of discrepancies in the Horizon-generated branch accounts. And you say, I required access to all data, even in a read-only format, held on the system in relation to all input by me and my staff, which happened at the branch. In respect of verifying information regarding those transactions, or the accounts that they ultimately formed a part of, I could only check transaction logs that were available on Horizon for limited periods of time, or use the limited range of information and reports I had access to, and which could be printed from Horizon terminals, comparing them to stock in the branch. I had no real way of checking information held in Horizon that came from Post Office itself, or from its clients, such as Camelot, or indeed the way in which those had been reconciled with transactions in the branch. And then if we go further on, please. Scroll down, please, to 54. Whilst the position as stated in the letter, that's the letter we've just read, is that they'd reviewed and interrogated and concluded there was nothing inherently wrong with the Horizon system, I'd seen no evidence of the apparent review and interrogation they'd claimed to carry out. I was still without the data, which I'd been requesting for a number of years, nor had they discussed their findings with me. I do not believe there was any investigation or evidence that the purported investigation had taken place. Have you seen any evidence to date that the purported investigation that's referred to in the letter sent on behalf of the chairman taken place?
No, I haven't. I've only ever seen claims that it taken place.
So far as you know, was the data that you are speaking about in these paragraphs that you needed access to in order to understand the cause of an apparent shortfall or an over, common to all cases in sub-post offices that you later came across, i.e. that no one could actually, in the post office branch, get access to the data they needed to see what had happened?
Not that I'm aware of, anyway. So.
You, I think, wrote to your MP, is that right?
Correct.
Can we look, please, at poll 304 0368? You tell us in your witness statement that you wrote to your MP about your case. That's Miss Williams, is that right?
That's right.
On the 27th of October 2003, and she in turn raised it with Post Office and with the Minister. She received a reply saying that they had taken a decision to review the case in its entirety. You say that that was carried out behind closed doors and didn't involve any contact with you, is that right?
That's correct.
And then she wrote again to Post Office and your MP, as a result of which Post Office wrote this letter on the 19th of January 2004. And if we look at the second page, sorry, just scroll up to the bottom of the first page. We can see that it's written by Richard Barker, the then General Manager of the Commercial Network. And go to the top, please. He says to Betty Williams MP, I promised to write to you once a comprehensive review had been undertaken of the issues raised by you. That review has been completed by a senior manager within Post Office with considerable experience in the handling of disputes and subsequent appeals. The conclusions of that review, which I fully endorse, are that the termination of your contract was done following proper investigation, coupled with proper warnings and with appropriate offers of additional training and support. No evidence was found which in any way substantiates the various claims being made by Mr. Bates. And Mr. Barker goes as far as saying that the decision to terminate your contract was not only correct, it was the only sensible option. The best way is to consider the matter closed. Again, were you involved in any such comprehensive review?
No, and that was one of my big objections. No one ever came and spoke to me about it or tried to understand what the problem had been. It was, as I said before, or as it's been recorded, it was carried on behind closed doors.
So we've seen you write to your MP, we've seen you write directly to Alan Layton and the reply, we've seen your MP write to Post Office, and we've seen this reply trying to ask questions. It's suggested in some parts of your witness statement that they were being shut down or fobbed off by the Post Office. Is that your view?
It seems to be the way the business works, yes.
Can we turn, please, to poll 0032-8099? And if we just pan out a little bit, it may be that these 5 paragraphs on this undated piece of paper are the comprehensive review that has been referred to in the correspondence.
It may be, but I hadn't seen them until recent.
No. I just want to look at what the author, Sandy Stephen, says. they say, I've reviewed, if we scroll to the top paragraph, please, all the files from the date of Horizon installation until the termination of Bates' contract and read all the subsequent correspondence. I've summarised the salient points. Following Bates's assertions against the Horizon system, there were clear attempts made by several people to ascertain whether, if there were systems problems. Eventually, it was decided to write off the debt, and a clear signal was given to Bates that all future losses would be recovered. Significantly, further training and support was given to Bates at that time. Is that true?
Well, it's true. That's what it says, yes.
I meant in reality.
Yeah, no, I'm afraid it wasn't that way.
No. Later, it transpired, and Bates admitted that he continued to roll over losses. Did you have to admit to this, or were you in fact telling retail line managers?
Sorry, I already informed them.
Yes.
I was right. And I wasn't hiding the fact at all. They were well aware of what.
Okay. So later it transpired, and you admitted that you continue to roll over losses and had done so since the introduction of Horizon. He received a formal letter instructing him to stop the practice. That's true. We've seen that from Mr. Wakely. And make good any losses. That's also true. He did not. That's also true. Losses continued to be made and rolled over, and the retail line manager sought advice from contracts and legal services before terminating the contract. From the evidence contained in the files, it's clear that retail line conducted themselves correctly and acted in accordance with the rules. And then this, leaving aside the anecdotal evidence on file, which demonstrates Bates' unsuitability as a postmaster. Was that ever put to you, that you were unsuitable to be a postmaster?
No, but they'd appointed me in the first instance.
Are you aware of what anecdotal evidence there might be which demonstrates your unsuitability to be a postmaster?
I have records of that time which were statements from the retail network manager, or my current retail network manager at that time, which was Mike Wakely, to say how well the office was doing and well done for all the hard work. I mean, it's a nonsense. This was just them flexing their muscle and just deciding they're right and I was wrong.
They point out Post Office has an absolute right to terminate a contract with 3 months' notice. That's also one of the true statements in this document. It was done in this instance following proper investigation, formal warning coupled with support and additional training. Yet you, quote, continue to flaunt and ignore the legitimate instructions from your retail line manager. And then we see a sentence that gets cut into the letter that we've just read. The decision to terminate was not only right, it was the only sensible option, which is what led me to think that this was the comprehensive review and investigation that had been referred to. It says that you continue to flaunt the legitimate instructions of the retail line manager. Did you flaunt his instructions?
No, I just pointed out what I was doing and the reasons why I was doing it. But they'd never respond to me. They'd never discuss the issue about data and data access and liability and holding and how long that liability lasted for and all the rest of it. When I went into Post Office, it was sold to me at the time as you were in partnership with the business. But you very soon learnt that this was a very one-sided partnership. I mean, basically, you do whatever you're told was your side of the partnership. And they just didn't seem to like it if you raised any queries, even no matter how justified they were.
In relation to this part of the narrative, can we lastly please look at poll 404598 at page 3, please. And scroll down, please. This is part of a slew of correspondence that I'm not going to investigate in detail over whether you would continue to provide a service within the post office as an interim measure, and the arrangements that were being made for the post office to come into the branch and take away what they say belong to them. You say, at no time did post office ever ask me if I would continue providing a service as an interim measure. I would not deny you did make a sort of request to use our premises and our facilities to have someone else come in to provide a service at a time when you'd taken away our livelihood, investment and savings. But as you don't seem to live in the real world, I can tell you that this was just received as an insult. It seems your organisation will do anything and everything to try and keep the failures of Horizon hidden, regardless of who they have to trample down on the way, such as us or our community. I can assure you of my continued and now increased resolve to bring the real facts of what is going on to those who will have no choice but to act, regardless of whether it takes years. In relation to the penultimate paragraph there, the post office would do anything and everything to try and keep the failures of Horizon hidden. Why do you think that why did you think that they were trying to keep the failures of Horizon hidden?
I think a number of reasons. First off, I think their field personnel didn't understand it to any great depth, and they just seem to follow the corporate mantra that Horizon is robust and that's it, and everyone else is wrong. They didn't seem to want to engage in useful discussions about how to try and improve things. Any that they did make, any approaches they made were very much surface. It was just for show, rather than to change things in any meaningful way. It was a variety of things at that time.
Is what you write in that paragraph, was what you wrote in that paragraph based on your own experience, or were you drawing from wider experiences of others then?
Well, first off, I had some experience of those types of systems, and it was obvious it was extremely poorly designed, and it didn't really do the job it was meant to, and there were a huge amount of problems. And I kept on hearing little problems from all sorts of people, other sub-postmasters, because I used to go to regional federation meetings as well, and you did sit and chat, and everyone had a moan and a whinge about it. And you heard of stories of where people were literally taking their computers and the whole systems and leaving them on the pavement outside and telling post office to come and collect it. Those were the sort of stories that were running around at the time in there. But I think it was the lack of real engagement in all of this to try and resolve the problems, address the problems and resolve them, which made me think they've just put up a stone wall on the whole thing.
Your last paragraph might be considered to be prophetic.
Yeah,
but I don't suppose when you wrote it, you would end up 20 years later sitting here answering my questions.
No.
In the clip of materials that identified or led to the Sandy Stephen comprehensive review that we saw, the 5 paragraphs on the 1 page, in that clip of material is a note from Mike Wakely, your retail line manager, contributing to that document. And he said that at this time, Alan believes his actions are now a matter of principle. Is that how you felt?
It was, because it goes back to an earlier letter that they could hold me liable for any amount in there. That's what they wanted me to agree to, and that was wrong.
That can come down, thank you. I think one of the first things that you did after termination of your contract was to set up the website, www.postofficevictims.org.uk.
I did, yeah. Yes, I did. And I also wrote to the local newspaper to explain to the local community what had gone on. Unfortunately, the local paper printed my letter in full to explain what had happened with Post Office. I also had large-scale posters blown up of that letter, which were attached to the front of the door of our premises and remained there for quite a time.
And postofficevictims.org UK it was the nascent group that subsequently became the JFSA, is that right?
I suppose it was like a seed, I wouldn't say organisation. It was what I set up initially there to try and attract and draw other cases, and also as a warning to others about getting involved with Post Office. This is the type of organisation you are planning to get involved with. And there were other things I did as well around that time to try and raise the profile of the issue.
Can we turn to page 28 of your witness statement, please? And paragraph 92. And if we zoom in on that, please, you say, my main objective for creating the JFSA was to expose the truth. I wanted to create a body of former and current sub-postmasters and branch assistants which could provide a community for all those going through the same experiences with the Post Office. I knew that I was not alone in my dealings with the Post Office, and the JFSA was set up in order to ensure that other people in the same situation as myself knew that they too were not on their own. As mentioned above, there was a complete lack of support from Post Office, and I believe those in similar circumstances required support. I've read elsewhere that one of the reasons that you set up the group was that you and others had felt that you had been abandoned by every other organisation, so that you had to group together. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's true. What you're saying there, it was myself and others as well. It wasn't. I know I seem to take the lead in it, but there are a lot of others. Certainly in the early days, there was a great deal of support from.
Which other organisations had abandoned you and others?
Well, certainly the Federation. The Federation was absolutely useless. I mean, they were just another department of Post Office, as I believe it still is these days as well. But
why do you think they're just another department of the Post Office?
Well, at one time, I believe they had an office in Post Office headquarters, but ignoring that, it depends which bit we're going. If you go right back to the early days, the 2002s, 2003s, and when I was going to these Federation meetings, I know I attended one meeting where a sub-postmaster at the back of the meeting group, he started saying, I've just had my Post Office taken off me, and I'd had problems with Horizon and all the rest. And the Federation exec people who were there escorted him out the back of the place. They took him away out of that meeting. I know perfectly well when my contract was terminated, I went to a Federation meeting to try, a local branch one. I went to a Federation meeting where I tried to speak on behalf of that. And there was one of the National Executive Federation members at that meeting, and he tried to stop me speaking. He refused to say that I should be allowed to talk about such things at the meeting. And if it hadn't been for the local chairman, who was Noel Thomas at that time, if it hadn't been for him talking and moving this chap out the way, I'd never been able to get over what had happened to me and explain to the others in it. So there was an awful lot of pressure from the Federation to support Post Office in it. In fact, there is, I don't know if you're going to show it, there is correspondence from the Federation where they actually support Post Office's position in terminating my contract. I don't know whether you're going to cover that.
Slightly out of order, but I think I know what you're talking about. Can we?
Yeah, sorry. You're asking about the Federation.
I'm the one that's supposed to bowl the fast balls. I think, if I can cover drive it back, it's poll 0021 5384.
If you're right, that's a good slip catch.
Is that the document you're talking about? A letter to you from Colin Baker, the General Secretary of the NFSP.
Yeah, I think that's the one, yeah.
You had written a couple of letters to him that I'm not going to show now, of December 2003 and January 2004. And he notes that Betty Williams has written to Alan Layton. We've seen that. He says, I can go no higher within the Royal Mail Group than Alan Layton. I'm sure that your Member of Parliament will have had as much, if not more, success than I would. Hopefully you'll have more information from that route. And then the last paragraph, I think, is the one you're referring to. We're not in a position to provide information regarding other sub-postmasters' dealings with Post Office. We're aware there are some disputes around the time that offices migrated from the manual system to the Horizon system. But we are now of the view that Horizon works well and there are no real problems with post offices which are operating or operated by the Horizon system. Was that essentially the NFSP position as communicated to you? Horizon works well, there are no problems with in post offices with it?
Yeah, and it was very much, I mean, the Federation always seemed to try and manage any of the problems around Horizon. I can recall a conference, Federation conference, main conference, I think it was in 2002, around there, it was in Llandudno, which is why I went to it. And there were a whole host of people raising queries, delegates raising queries about Horizon during conference. And it got to such a state that they couldn't move on with conference, and conference decided to set up a separate committee to look into Horizon issues and for members to report that to them. And they would then discuss them with Post Office.
To what extent has the NFSP assisted you in establishing the facts in your case?
None.
To what extent has the NFSP assisted you in seeking redress in your case?
None.
To your knowledge, what role did the NFSP play in assisting other sub-postmasters when it was alleged against the sub-postmaster that they had a shortfall?
I have not heard of one instance where they've successfully done anything of that nature.
I think you tell us that you've been informed that the Post Office would often only allow a representative of the NFSP or a friend to sit in on interviews where suspension or termination was contemplated.
That's correct.
And you tell us in your statement that the NFSP nearly always agreed with the Post Office and said sometimes to the postmaster, come on, own up, tell them what you did with the money.
Yeah.
Are these accounts that other sub-postmasters have given to you?
Yes, they are.
To your knowledge, has the NFSP ever once helped a sub-postmaster in any court case in which the operation of the Horizon system or the integrity of the data which it produces has been questioned?
No.
To what extent did the NFSP assist in the group litigation?
None at all.
To what extent has the NFSP assisted others following the group litigation in obtaining redress?
I don't know.
Thank you. If we can go back to where we were in the account, that can come down from the screen. Thank you. You'd set up the JFSA, and you tell us that from the late 2000s onwards, so from about 2009 onwards, you have spent an estimated 30 to 40 hours a week campaigning in relation to Post Office and Horizon. Is that right?
Easily, yes.
Can we look, please, at page 27 of your witness statement? And paragraph 87 at the top, you say the challenges were faced at every step of the way since the Post Office would obstruct me. The gravity and enormity of the problem was not recognised by others in power, including government, and it became clear that the only way to achieve progress was through a formal legal route, which has its own challenges, including obtaining the necessary funding for this route. You say there that challenges were faced at every step of the way since the Post Office would obstruct me. What had you got in mind when you were saying that?
Well, disclosure is a good one. I mean, we went through, before we got to the court case, we went through a whole host of schemes, and they always used to say, yes, we'll be supportive, yes, we'll try, you know, with MPs and all the rest of it, yes, we'll get on board with it, yes, we're looking for the truth and all the rest of it. But all they did is cause problems. They were not forthcoming with the details in there. Certainly, disclosure is a very good example of that. I mean, cases used to take months and months to progress. I'm thinking of the initial mediation scheme, for example. And you just felt though they were there, you were still banging your head against a brick wall to try and get anything out of them, because they were determined to protect the brand at any cost. And they didn't want anything coming out or being disclosed that might cause damage to Post Office.
Now, you ceased work as a sub-postmaster in November 2003.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yes.
And I think you've not returned to other work since then, because instead you've dedicated to campaigning for accountability, justice and redress. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the key issue has always been to expose the truth right from the outset, because the other things sort of always felt they followed on. Once you know the truth about issues, the rest will hopefully follow on afterwards. I mean, I didn't set out to spend 20 years doing this. I hadn't expected to be doing this so much by myself, but it got more and more complex, and it was harder and harder to share out and work as a bigger group to take things forward. So yeah, I did finish up sort of leading in a way in there, but obviously going back to the others when there was an opportunity for their endorsement. It was encouraging along the way. One of the things we did do is bring people together, and a lot of people. It was a bit like, I don't mean this in a derogative way, but it's a bit like stray lambs. They were lost. People were lost out there. They're the only ones. They're wandering around, wondering, you know, what have I done wrong? They're suffering so badly. But once you manage to bring them together to meet others in a similar situation, it had enormous effect on their lives.
You've spent 2 decades undertaking this work, presumably thousands of hours.
Yes.
Why, in your view, has that been necessary?
Because the further down the road you went with it, the more you realised you couldn't let it go.
I think you, at one stage, attempted the strategy of speaking to government about this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can we turn, please, to correspondence with Ed Davey MP in May 2010? That can come down from the screen, thank you. And so to put this into context, to orientate ourselves, May 2010, JFSA was well established now.
Yeah. Yes.
The Computer Weekly article had been written by Rebecca Thompson on the 11th of May 2009.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you were indeed interviewed by her as part of her work.
Yes, that's correct.
And her work drew together the facts about a number of cases.
Yes. Can
we look then at the letter that you wrote to Ed Davey, MP, on the 20th of May 2010, UKGI 301 6119. So, as we can see from the way you've addressed the letter, at the top, Minister for Postal Affairs within the Department of Business, Innovation and Skills, sometimes called BIS. So I think to put his position in context there, he was the then Minister for Postal Affairs, the new government having been formed 14 days earlier on the 6th of May 2010. General election that year was 6th of May, so he's 14 days in. Can we read the letter together? You say, I'm writing to you with regard to your position as Minister on behalf of JFSA. We're an independent group of ex and serving sub-postmasters who've suffered at the hands of the Post Office and their Horizon system ever since it was first installed. Our website outlines how we came about and our aims, as well as offering sample cases that were provided by some of the group. Currently, the group numbers close to 100, though we continue to be joined by others who have learned of JFSA and have found that there is nowhere else to turn for help. In every instance, the Post Office acts as judge, jury, and executioner, and the individual is deserted by their reputed representative organisation, the National Federation of Sub-Postmasters. Invariably, these cases all stem from the flaws of the Horizon system that the Post Office introduced and which they refuse to admit has ever suffered from a single problem. The evidence is there to be found by anyone in a position of being able to unlock doors instead of placing barriers in the way of those pursuing the information. Our organisation has access to a number of specialists who could provide the questions and analyse the resulting data if required, though an independent external investigation instigated at ministerial level would be most appropriate and will, without doubt, easily find evidence of the error-ridden system. I'm sure you'll appreciate that there is not a single computer system that does not, from time to time, suffer from errors, especially when the size and level of complexity of the programs associated with the Horizon system. The Post Office blindly state that there are not, nor have there ever been, any system errors. So subsequently, anything wrong is entirely the responsibility of the sub-postmaster, as that is what they've agreed to when signing their contract. This is a contract that was produced in 1994 and does not address nor identify new technology, but they're still using it to intimidate and prosecute sub-postmasters. Over the page. The weight of evidence we've been collating over the years continues to grow and gain in standing. It's only the flat refusal of the Post Office to allow experts to examine the system which is holding back this major scandal from breaking. With the the growing numbers in JFSA and the support we're now finding from the IT community and the media, it's just a matter of time until the real truth about the Post Office and Horizon is exposed. Over the years, I've personally submitted written details of all of this to the Select Committee of the DTI, and then on 2 other occasions to that of Burr, and put simply, the information has either been buried or disappeared. Others of JFSA have followed the route of contacting their MPs, who've taken the matter up with the Post Office on their behalf. Subsequently, they're stonewalled or handled by the Post Office, often with off-the-shelf answers where they only change the name and address. I'm writing to you on behalf of the group. I'm asking for a meeting where we can present our case to you. Much has appeared in the press over the last few days that government is going to change, and I only hope that's true. If it is, the abuse of sub-postmasters that has been going on under the protection of the previous government may well come to an end. So your letter to Mr. Davey MP provides some detail, either in the body of the letter or through cross-referencing to your website, as to the issues that sub-postmasters were facing, and informs Mr. Davey that the Post Office's conduct amounted to a scandal?
Yes, very much.
Can we look at the reply, please? ABAT 701. Dear Alan Bates, thank you for your letter of the 20th of May requesting a meeting. Since 2001, when the Royal Mail, which includes Post Office Limited, was set up as a public limited company with the government as its only shareholder, government has adopted an arm's length relationship with the company so that it has commercial freedom to run its business operations without interference from the shareholder. The integrity of the post office system is an operational and contractual matter for the post office and not government. And whilst I do appreciate your concerns and those of Alliance members, I do not believe that a meeting would serve any useful purpose. You tell us in your witness statement that you took offence at the term arm's length to describe the role that the government played in relation to overseeing and monitoring the post office. Why?
Well, it's because of the structure, wasn't it? Government was the sole shareholder. They were the owners, as such, of all of this. And how can you run or take control or take responsibility for an organisation without having some interest in there or trying to be in control? In fact, government were pumping huge amounts of money into post office year after year. So, you know, they need to be held responsible, or they need to be addressed really about the way that they've been going on. And it's very hard to engage them in it. Not nowadays, they're a bit more interested these days, but I mean at that time to try and get government to take it on board seriously, it was
But before a four-part drama on
well,
ITV.
in fairness, yes, the drama was great. It did a lot for us. But, I mean, we've had enormous cross-party support from many MPs over the years, some of whom I think you'll see shortly. But, I mean, the time this letter was written was in 2010. And I think at that time we were involved with a firm called Shoesmiths, a law firm called Shoesmiths. And there have been a number of meetings bringing people together. And in fact, Shoesmiths had been working with the MPs. So we were growing a body, we were growing an interest. And a number of the other MPs were finding their own constituents who'd had problems, sub-postmaster problems. So it was starting to become a little more gelled as an organisation, and the number with a substantial number, a growing number in there. And it was very much why we felt government should have been involved at that time. I mean, you show me this letter from Ed Davey, and I don't know what your script is, but I'm more concerned about another letter that came in response from a letter I wrote to Ed Davey, and I'm not sure whether you're going to go to that.
Let's see.
Yeah. You
tell us in your witness statement, I'm not going to turn it up, it's paragraph 104, that this response from Mr. Davey was disappointing because he had not taken account of anything which you had said in your letter and indeed appeared to be a standard template form of response. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I think you didn't keep those feelings to yourself at the time. You, in fact, sent a reply to Mr. Davey on the 8th of July 2010. Can we please look at UKGI 301 6099? You say, I have to say that your response to me, dated the 31st of May, that's the one we've just looked at, regarding the very serious issues I had raised, was not only disappointing, but I actually found your comments offensive. It seems, though, that there are new politicians in post. The government hasn't changed. The letter you sent is little different to the one I received 7 years ago from the minister responsible for post offices at that time. And so many more lives have been ruined in the interim because of that same attitude. It's not that you can't get involved or cannot investigate the matter. After all, you do own 100% of the shares, and normally shareholders are concerned about the morality of the business they own. It's because you've adopted an arm's length relationship that you have allowed a once great institution to be asset stripped by little more than thugs in suits, and you've enabled them to carry on with impunity regardless of the human misery and suffering they inflict. You can listen to your civil servants telling you that these are really an operational matter for the post office to deal with. You can even listen to the post office telling you Horizon is wonderful, that there's never ever been a problem. It is inherently robust, and these are just a few malcontents trying to cause trouble. Or you can meet with us and hear the real truth behind Horizon and what the post office is actually up to. Your civil servants and the post office will not tell you about post office staff harassing sick ex-sub-postmasters demanding written promises of money, or they'll send the police around. They won't tell you that the post office watches post offices heading into trouble, fails to provide any help, and then waits until the problem shows a loss of £20,000 plus, so that the sub-postmaster then falls foul of the Proceeds of Crime Act. They won't tell you that when someone wants to sell their post office and has a suitable buyer, post office will turn down the applicant to drive that business into the ground. You won't hear about sub-postmasters endingly requesting audits of their offices and having to wait for up to 5 years for someone to turn up in offices turning over £5 million a year. Neither will they tell you of the cases where the post office have run an audit, closed the post office, bankrupting the owner, who loses his business, house and family, holds a pending court case over him for 18 months, then drops the charges and walks away. Nor will they tell all about how they are stopping sub-postmasters selling on the post office side of their business in order to recover the original investment. They won't even tell you that the Horizon system is designed to entrap sub-postmasters so that they can easily finish up in prison just by trying to open up the day after a trading period balance. This is just a taste of some of the practices your company is carrying out in your name day after day. They brandish a big legal stick, fail to provide evidence in court, and rely on the clause in the 1994 contract about a sub-postmaster being liable for any loss from their office, however it occurs. Yet their shoddy Horizon system is the root cause of all of this. Post Office themselves lose thousands of pounds from each of the Crown offices that they run using Horizon, though their staff are not treated as guilty until proven innocent, but a sub-postmaster is. The whole of this scandal is teetering on the edge of a precipice at this point, but it's still not too late for you to reconsider convening a meeting to discuss this issue involved, if you're prepared to keep an open mind. It seems that following your letter, Mr. Davey agreed to a meeting.
Yes, I think so.
At paragraph 105 of your witness statement, there's no need to turn it up, you confirm that you attended a meeting with Mr. Davey on or about the 7th of October. And you tell us that you don't in fact have a note of the meeting and can't recall details of the meeting. The inquiry is in possession of a briefing document for Mr. Davey for the purposes of his attendance at that meeting with you. Can we see whether we can look at that, please? UKGI 6062. It's dated, as you'll see, the 5th of October 2010, and the purpose of the document is a rescheduled meeting with you on the 7th of October to discuss the JFSA's claims that endemic flaws in the Horizon system have resulted in a number of sub-postmasters having their contracts wrongly terminated, and in many cases prosecuted for false accounting. And if we scroll down, please. It sets out the background to the meeting, recalling the history of your two letters, describing the second as being more confrontational. And then it says that, this is the fourth line of that paragraph, that letter was followed by reports that Channel 4 were planning to run a news item on the JFSA campaign. We then recommended offering a meeting in response to this second request, that's the letter we've just read, quote, for presentational reasons, against the background of potential publicity playing heavily on government minister, quote, refusing to meet victims of government-owned post office Horizon system, which has systemic faults resulting in wrongful accusations of theft and false accounting, end quote. So this records that the recommendation to Mr. Davey was that he should offer to attend a meeting for presentational reasons against the background of potential publicity, i.e. the Channel 4 news item. When you attended the meeting, can you recall whether Mr. Davey appeared to engage with the substance of the issues that you were raising?
I don't recall.
You don't recall whether he did or not?
No, I don't recall the detail of the meeting, and I'm quite certain that if there had been something positive that was coming out of it, I'd have remembered that.
If we scroll on the briefing note for Mr. Davis, Mr. Davey, it sets out the objectives. He's to seek to establish at a very early stage whether legal action against Post Office is imminent or planned, and it will be prudent to adopt a sub judice approach in the comments you make. He should emphasise the issues raised by the JFSA are operational and contractual matters, should make the point about government having an arm's length relationship, establish whether the JFSA is committed or planning to initiate action against the Post Office, note that it will be for the relevant legal process to decide on the JFA case, demonstrate you're prepared to hear the JFSA's side of the story, but make it clear you're not in a position to offer substantive comment, and avoid committing to setting up an independent or external review of Horizon. Do you recall whether Mr. Davey responded to the points that you had made in detail in your letter of the 8th of July?
No, I don't recall. Sorry.
To your mind, was Mr. Davey aware at the conclusion of your meeting that a scandal, in your view, had taken place and was in the process of still taking place?
I don't recall.
Did Mr. Davey alter the position that he had set out in the letter, that the government enjoyed an arm's length relationship with the Post Office in the light of the concerns that you had raised?
I don't know.
What was the outcome of the meeting?
I can't think of anything startling that came out of it, otherwise I'd probably recall it. But I suppose, I mean, this has been like a long journey. You sort of, you finish one thing, you move on to the next. Been there, done that, tried that, so let's just keep going. So I think it was just another step along the way.
Did you walk away from the meeting with Mr. Davey having said that he was going to do anything at all?
Not that I can recall, which I can recall from other ministers I've met.
Are you able to remember any positive development arising from the meeting?
No.
Thank you, that can come down. Looking at the way that the Horizon scandal developed, what view do you take of the arm's length approach that the government took in relation to its oversight of the Post Office?
I think it should have been involved or got involved far earlier on. And in fact, I don't want to preempt where you're going, but there was, I think one of the responses I think I got from Ed Davies' office at a later time, which, oh no, it might have been a different minister. Sorry, I may be jumping the gun. It was a response that I'd written to one of the ministers for a meeting, but and to inform them that 4 letters of intent had been issued by the lawyers, shoesmiths at that time. But the response didn't come from the minister. It came from the shareholder executive, i.e. government. So they were fully aware that legal proceedings were potentially about to begin.
Throughout your statement, you refer to the responses of government ministers across the years. Pat McFadden, Ed Davey, Norman Lamb, Joe Swinson and others on being repeatedly informed about the concerns of sub-postmasters and Crown Office employees, the formation of the JFSA and indeed the GLO, in which they say that the Post Office is an arm's length body, that the matters raised were matters for the Post Office to deal with, and that the Post Office was independent of government.
I do think a lot of the ministers, a lot of them come in for a stick in the inquiry and all the rest of it. And I'm sure some of it's deserved, but I actually hold the department and I hold the civil service more to blame in a lot of these instances, why things never progressed at the time. Because I'm sure between them and Post Office briefing ministers, they were briefing them in the direction they wanted to brief them in. Not that was for the benefit of the group or the individuals in there, because of the positions that they felt they were in and that should be taken at that time. And also knowing that they probably have other organisations hammering away on and nagging at them, but they were going to probably wait and see who got there the furthest, who got the furthest. But I do think I do certainly hold the officials far more guilty in all of this than the politicians.
You tell us, finally, before lunch, in paragraph 298 of your witness statement, that around this point, the point being after the settlement of the group litigation, the government abandoned the line that this was all a matter for the Post Office and moved on to the new line that it had been misled by the Post Office. Is that your view?
I don't think they could deny anything else, could they really?
Thank you very much, Mr. Bates. If that's an appropriate moment, can I ask that, I think it's 5 past now, can we reconvene at 5:02?
Yeah.
So 5 to 2.
5 to 2, everyone, yeah.